So right now, the Seattle Seahawks are in a pretty interesting predicament when it comes to their quarterback situation. I think when you lose an elite quarterback, that's sort of what happens. You typically don't want to do that. You typically don't want to lose a guy like a Russell Wilson and then replace him potentially with a Geno Smith or Drew Lock. So I think if you are the Seahawks, you're in a much worse position than you were last year having Russell Wilson, and maybe the Seahawks thought eventually Russell would want out, and maybe he wanted to be traded, and they're just like, okay, well, let's at least get something in return. So that is a pass now. The Broncos have Russell Wilson, which I think makes them a much, much better team. But now the Seahawks are in an interesting predicament, considering right now their two quarterback options are Geno Smith as well as Drew Lock. And Pete Carroll actually had a pretty interesting word to say in the past couple of days about Drew Lock. A pretty bold take, I would say, and let me read it right here on Sports Illustrated. So this is what Carroll had to say. He said, I think he'd been the first guy picked, of quarterbacks anyway, Carroll said via Pro Football Talk. He'd have been the first guy in this draft. I don't have any hesitation saying that. So Pete Carroll thinks that when you look at the quarterback prospects in this draft class, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Matt Corral, that Drew Lock would have been picked number one not overall in the draft, but pick ahead of those guys in the 2022 NFL draft. So I think that is some pretty high praise for Drew Lock with him coming to Seattle. I wouldn't expect, Pete Carroll to come in and say, Drew Lock is terrible. We traded for him, but we think he's terrible. I think it makes sense that Pete Carroll is praising Drew Lock. The question I have, though, is Drew Lock the future in Seattle? I'm just not too sold on that point right now. I don't think Pete Carroll necessarily is completely either. He did say also, I think it was earlier today, that Geno Smith is still, as of right now, the starting quarterback, and Drew Lock will have to overtake him and outcompete him in this offseason to have that starting role, considering Geno Smith, had some time here last year with the Seattle Seahawks. So I feel like Drew Lock will beat out Geno Smith. I don't exactly know. But now the question still is for the Seahawks, what are they going to do when it comes to their quarterback situation? Because I don't think Drew Lock or Geno Smith are the long-term answer for the Seattle Seahawks. One interesting potential scenario that I do think could happen is Baker Mayfield coming to the Seattle Seahawks. I do believe that recently Pete Carroll said that they're not interested in, trading for a guy like that or picking up a veteran like a Baker Mayfield. But I think that there's a scenario in Pete Carroll's mind where if Baker Mayfield becomes available and they don't have to pay him, that $18 million, or they're able to trade for him from the Browns, I wouldn't be so shocked to see Pete Carroll rather have Baker Mayfield than both Drew Lock and Geno Smith. Because honestly, if I had to pick between those three guys, if I had to, I'll probably go Baker Mayfield just because I think he has been more successful than these other guys. I think he has shown that he has a ability to be pretty solid. Top 15 to 20 quarterback. I'll put him in that range if he's healthy. I think last year definitely was not a great showing from Baker Mayfield, but I think it did partly have to do with him dealing with all those injuries and playing through those injuries. So I think if he gets back to his 2020 form where he threw 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, I think he could be a solid quarterback, and the Seahawks, I think, would be better off with that Baker Mayfield than having Drew Lock or Geno Smith. And if we take a look at Drew Lock's stats, in his 3 years since he's been playing in the NFL, he is currently 8-13, which is his record. He has thrown he's a career 59% completion percentage, a total of 25 touchdowns to 20 interceptions. Last year, 2021, he was 0-3, only played he started 3 games, threw 2 TDs, 2 interceptions. The year before that, 2020, where he started 13 games, he had 16 TDs, 15 interceptions. So unless he can take some crazy leap forward in these next couple of years, I just don't see him being your long-term answer at quarterback. So I think the Seahawks, if they're smart, would try to make a move for Baker Mayfield, but maybe they want to play things out and maybe next year come in and draft a quarterback and sort of keep the roster they have now, because I have heard there's lots of really, really good quarterbacks in next year's draft class. So maybe they're like, we're not going to try quite as hard this year when it comes to quarterback. We'll sort of let things play out. And they're probably like, hey, maybe we'll get a top 10 draft pick next year, and that could get us our long-term option at quarterback. So who knows what Pete Carroll's actually thinking, what his actual plan is. Maybe we'll see sometime in the future. But anyways, that's my thoughts on this situation. If you guys haven't subscribed, I put up NFL content on this channel. So if you're into that, you like the NFL, you like football, then feel free to subscribe. You're welcome here. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys next time.